Okay, well,
So
let's get started, everybody. Thanks all for attending today and spending your lunch with us. Our goal is to leave you with some good information and to have a lively discussion around Office 365 security. So, just to kind of give a quick introduction to those on the call today, we've got Ethan Tancredi from Huntress. He's a sales engineer. Ethan, you want to take a moment to just kind of talk through your background a little bit?
Yeah. So my background is I've been in technology since, oh my goodness, I started in 1996 when I got my first job in it, where somebody asked me what I knew about computers, and I told them I knew enough to break them. That eventually, got me to where I am now. But I started as a tech for an MSP at one point back in 2005, and have been in that MSP space for quite some time. And then came over to Huntress. We are a man security platform. If you're unfamiliar with what we do, and help partners like yourself, Andrew, with answering questions about our platform and helping educate just community in general about security. It's one of the reasons I came to Huntress.
Great. We've got Marissa Maldonado, our Chief Executive Officer, as well. Everyone on the call should know Marissa. I'm going to take a moment, Marissa, and just talk about yourself and a little bit about Proto.
sure. I'll say, hey, Ethan, by the way, I totally became a fangirl of Huntress when I saw you guys in your communication efforts with the big supply chain July hack. I won't say
Yes.
vendors' names on here, but and seeing how you guys navigated it through like the MSP Reddit thread, and I was like, oh, these people are so cool. So I am a
Yes.
fangirl of you
Oh,
guys, by the way.
thank you. Thank
So
you.
I'm very honored to have you guys part of this. It's very cool. Hi, I'm Marissa, one of the founders of Proda Technology, now the CEO. I've been doing this now for 12, 13 years at this point. So I have the white hair to prove it. And yeah, I'm very passionate about giving these services to our clients and to others, and really being able to have these really awesome strategic partnerships where I'm like a fangirl of them too. So that helps. And helping you guys demystify this stuff and make it tangible and easy to understand and ingest.
Great.
And of
Thank you.
course, Andrew.
Yes, Andrew Zaccoli. I wear the client services hat at Proda, and I'm also our Chief Information Security Officer. So I do risk management for both Proda, the company, and our clients as well. And I also work with our senior engineering team to make sure that we're always using the most effective security stack. So for all of our clients on the call, you'll know Huntress because about a year ago, we first deployed it to all Proda clients as a part of an effort to really upgrade our security posture across the board. So when we started talking about doing this talk today, it really coincided with some work that the Huntress team has been doing over the last year to develop the same level of protection that they have for our computers and our servers, and start to offer that type of protection to Office 365 as well. Which is why Ethan was a natural fit to come and join us. So we look forward to the talk today. I'll move us on to kind of our next slide here, where we talk about exactly what we're going to cover. So from today's talk, we're going to go through cyber threats that we're seeing today. Ethan, myself, Marissa, we're constantly attending trade shows and security conferences. We're also reading threat reports. So analyzing data from the big powerhouses in the IT and the telecommunications industry to figure out where are those cyber threats coming from and what are the newest best practices to protect your businesses, to make sure that you're as safe as you can be from evolving cyber threats. We're going to talk about the latest and greatest best practices for email security. So if you're a client of ours today, we've already likely had conversations with you about some of the things we're going to talk to today, but this is just going to give us some extra information, go into a little more detail and peel back a layer of that onion to help understand the why behind the types of things that we're recommending our clients do to protect their email systems. And lastly, we're going to leave everyone with some actionable takeaways, things that may be a service that Proda can offer. It may be something that's free that's available to you to write a policy around, or maybe just to dust off one you have today, or some free settings that you can change in your Office 365 environment that'll dramatically improve your security posture.
And if there's any questions you guys have as we're talking, we definitely want to have this as a fluid conversation. We have it right now muted, but if you just go into the chat and start talking, we can unmute you guys, ask questions away. I might assume there's some questions. I might ask them for you guys. So yes.
Okay, Marissa's going to play client on this call. I love it.
Ooh,
Good
I
job.
like I like asking uncomfortable questions. My favorite.
Very
Well,
good.
to get us started today, I really just wanted to talk about the latest threat reports. So every summer, Verizon releases their data breach report. There are a half dozen, major reports that get released, but this is the most recent one that I've seen. It came out last month. And Verizon looks at, the internet service provider looks at all of their customers and those that report data breaches. They collect information about, and then ultimately, put together this report that the industry uses to help us understand where are those cyber threats coming from. And what we're seeing here is that social engineering attacks continue to be the biggest threat for incurring some sort of security incident. So what's a social engineering attack? That's where somebody pretends to be someone else. That's where someone pretends to be you. Perhaps they get your credentials and they use that to then log in and convince others that they're you, and ask for anything from iTunes gift cards to perhaps your direct deposit information. So these attacks over the course of the last several years have become more and more predominant. It used to be 5 years ago that threat actors were looking for vulnerabilities in your firewall or vulnerabilities on your servers, and that's still the case. But it is a small percentage of the total attacks that end up happening. And stolen credentials is really one of the top ways that social engineering attacks get started. For Proda customers, our dark web monitoring helps us understand where your credentials might be out there, and then we can take steps to help make sure that we're resetting those credentials and offering additional layers of protection that ultimately can protect you in the event that your credentials do get into the hands of a bad actor.
Yeah,
Ethan,
and
what are
that's
you guys
why.
seeing?
Well, yeah, well, two things. One thing you were just saying there, Andrew, was that this is why I'm sure you tell all of your partners, right, have different passwords for all of your different accounts, because if one gets compromised, credentials are such a key part of that attacker tradecraft, right? That they get those credentials and then they try and use them everywhere because people reuse passwords. And so I'm sure that's the other part. You tell all of your partners, use a password manager, make those complex that you don't actually have to remember anything but your password manager password, the master password, if you will. And just something I like to emphasize with people is, yes, have multiple passwords, have them, and passwords is probably not the right word anymore, right? It's passphrases is what it should be. Something,
Okay.
you're thinking along complex things, because just what the Verizon data breach is talking about. The other one report I just recently saw came from the FBI for the 2022 year in cybercrime. And so I think it was a 10.3 billion with a B in monetary losses. Business email compromise was the second biggest at $2.7 billion of reported losses to the FBI last year. The first one was investment fraud. And I was actually at a talk last week where the FBI was talking about that. And the investment fraud really is crypto hijacking scams where which is a whole different conversation. But like for what most people are dealing with, it's business email compromise and those credentials, right? The first step is get social engineer, somehow give up those credentials to start to take over those accounts.
Yeah.
So that is definitely where we see those attacks. I mean, I think a number I saw recently was like 70% of those initial attack vectors are still coming through email phishing attacks, which is right. It's get in, convince somebody to click a link, so that they can start to do that social engineering and take over.
Yeah, so that
Uh,
takes us right into our next slide, which is, what are threat actors doing once they get your credentials? So you may get that text message that gives you a link and says, "Hey, we need you to sign into something to confirm your identity." Or perhaps it's an email where someone is giving you a file they want you to open, or it takes you to a page to put in your login credentials. That's why it's so important to make sure that you're educating your teams on the latest best practices, and how to check to make sure those emails or text messages are legitimate.
I
Just
like
as
to
it,
ref I like
go
to
ahead,
refer
Melissa.
to this as the domino effect, right? Because
Yeah.
then people are like, "How did this happen?" And it's like, "Well, it probably happened like 6 months ago or even longer, and then your data got sold again and again and again and again until it hit you and it got you." And they're 10 steps ahead of you before it even happens, and it's how do you pinpoint where it happened, right? It's the domino effect.
Yeah, and I got a text message from Marissa
Oh, did you
about a month
respond?
ago. I sent you a screenshot of it when it happened, but it was
Oh,
Marissa was asking me for iTunes gift cards,
it went out
and
to all of my staff actually, all at the same time. It was good
yeah,
yeah,
timing.
and those types of things are smash and grab, low maturity threat actors. But the same type of information, if put into the hands of somebody who's got a little more experience, can be used to do a lot of damage.
right. And I mean, we encourage at Huntress seeing those same kind of attacks to socialize them, and so we use Slack internally, and we'll get Slack will light up when Kyle, our CEO, is asking for, hey, do you have a moment? I need to talk to you. Critical. It, we're like, okay, Kyle never actually uses his cell phone via mobile, as far as any of us can tell. So right there, we know. But like, it's the other part. What's important here is socializing this in your companies and making sure people are okay pointing these things out. Like this is part of that developing a culture around it. Um,
And yeah, I think that's so important too because it's like for us and like the people that are like actively in this session right now that are actively seeking this information and you think that like, oh, we talked about this last year and we're good, right? This is basic stuff at this point. It's you got to do it again and again and again and again and again because it's that one small link, that one person out of a team of however many people that can be that pinpoint and that causes the domino effect that we refer to of everything else that happens afterwards. So even it might seem simple to you, I promise you, there's someone in that room that's like,
Well,
I
and I
had no
think
idea.
it's I'll jump off of that point. I work with our clients around their cybersecurity posture on a daily basis, and I have conversations with clients around their security awareness training campaigns, and I'll get questions sometimes like, "Well, 75% of my staff finished the training exercise. Isn't that okay, or is that good?" I was like, "Well, it may be better than not giving the training at all, but the 25% that remain, if they didn't finish that training, it's very possible that that's going to be the person who clicks on the malicious link or puts their passwords in." And when we're reviewing the simulated phishing attack results, we can see it time over time. Typically somewhere between 5 to 15% of your organization is going to click on that link, and maybe around 5%, that's 1 in 20 people, is going to put a credential into that. That means at a company the size of Proda, 1.25 people is going to put their credential in, and at a Huntress, that means you're going to have
yeah,
probably a half dozen.
Yep.
Y'all, I have the best story about this. So, like, I will go to specific industry conferences and do educational sessions about what's the NIST framework, what's this, cybersecurity 101, and going back into it, right? Because I'm like, okay, like, what if there's people that are going to be there from last time and it's going to be how do I reinvigorate the conversation and make sure it's not like super repetitive. So I was going through my session. It was in a specifically in a healthcare conference. I'm going through the 101, I'm talking through it, and assume nothing, right? Assume that everyone knows nothing and that's why they're there with you. And at the very end, this sweet woman who is a practice administrator for a healthcare practice raises her hand and goes, so, my doctor had made a request to change their direct deposit via email, and I didn't think anything of it. And I was about to do it literally while in here. And then the words that came out of your mouth made me hesitate. And sure enough, it was fraud. I was like, great, develop a process to make sure that doesn't happen again because everything needs to be validated through phone. But like, I left that session being like, my work here is done. You would have had a very, very, very angry owning position on your hands. And how do you recover from that? Like, very hard to get
Oh,
that money back.
yeah. No, definitely.
I'm
And
glad.
I mean, that gets us to what Andrew has up here about what are they doing, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it's changed those direct deposits. Totally, I've seen those. The invoice manipulation, Huntress, we've recently rolled out, Andrew kind of alluded to it, to a Microsoft managed detection response for Microsoft 365. And in one partner who we were protecting, we saw their end client was a transportation logistics company, and that they had somebody in that group get taken over, and we actually saw them, the threat actors, trying to communicate with three different. So think of the client, and then that client had business to business relationships as a large logistics company, and the threat actor got in there and started doing rules to do invoice manipulation attacks and try and get money redirected from three of those downstream clients because they had compromised somebody in the invoicing side of the business to reroute money or to send quote unquote what I'll call fake invoices, right? To try and, because at the end of the day, hacking, back back when I was young in the mid 90s, when I started getting into computers, hacking was about reputation and maybe finding information, but it is a business today. Like, they are out there to make money is their key motivating factor. And so, like, yes, they got into somebody who business to business could leverage multiple relationships and would try and get that, get money sent, um, and hide it in a way that nobody tells it till it's done. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I would say for every proactive conversation that we have, we have a reactive one too, where we were able to proactively put things in place to protect the client, but we have new clients call us prospects that they've had some sort of security incident and they need us to help us recover from it. So it's not all the type of conversation we like to have. So we really want to make sure that for every client we get our latest and greatest protections in place.
yeah,
For Proda today, we our 2023 service plan, that our new clients are coming into, has got a lot of protections in place that our older clients that have been with us for a decade may not have. So we're having conversations with them to try to put some of those more modern protections in place to help keep pace with the threats that we're seeing out there.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like a numbers game too, right? Because you just and that's why once again, just reiterating these type of conversations are so important to always continuously bring this to the front of our mind because you think about how to create a sales pipeline. It starts with a big pipeline and you bring in a lot of opportunities, and of those opportunities you get a couple and boom, and then like Ethan was saying, it's a business. Like and I hear a lot of people be like, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Why is this happening?" And well, it's happening because it's a good business. It works. Money is transferable very quickly, and really, this has been happening forever, right? This is the new age version of pirates,
Yeah.
and they're white collared workers in other countries where they are, the Robin Hoods of their country, taking money from, you know, big bad capitalistic America. Like the narration is very interesting when you kind of dive into that, and it helps demask who these people are, and knowing, like, just imagine in any given day how much data, emails, task, request, nagging, yanking, pulling that every single one of us and every single person that works in our organizations receives. It's a lot.
Yeah.
This was
No.
designed to be able for that one email, that one request, and you don't even think twice about it. You just want to get it out of your inbox and you want to just get it done. And then all of these other things start to happen once they get in. So
Yeah.
just
So
Definitely.
I guess the conversation goes to, how are we responding to this? What is Microsoft doing? What is Proda doing to help protect our clients? We'll start with Microsoft. So the two big things that Microsoft has done recently is they've really changed their guidance for how to implement multi-factor authentication. So it used to be that they would email you a code that you could, put that into your web browser to log in, or they'd send you a text message to your phone and you could put that in to verify who you are. The data and the threats that are out there have shown Microsoft that that's not effective any longer. So best practices have changed. There are ways that threat actors, given just a little bit of money, can get around your SMS based two-factor code. So Microsoft's best practice is to put a free technology in place, either using their Authenticator app, which we're now rolling out for all of our clients today in phases, where instead of getting a text message code, you get a pop-up on your phone on the Microsoft branded app that tells you, hey, someone's trying to log in. It asks, are you trying to sign in? And it asks you to put a code in place. That code is only visible to someone who is at the location that's trying to sign in. So if you're sitting in front of your computer, it's no big deal. It takes you 2 seconds, which is the same amount of time that it took you to retrieve that SMS code, that text message before. But if you're a threat actor, it makes it substantially harder to compromise, because this application is hard coded, and it's tied only to your phone. It has to be registered through the Microsoft system. So it's much more challenging for a threat actor to get around. And we've been implementing this with high degrees of success with clients. It used to be 5 years ago, there was a lot of resistance to putting multi-factor authentication applications on your smartphone. People didn't want to install an app. But now the majority of the world has smartphones, and people are so used to being required to install an authenticator app on their phone for, someone else's service, that we very rarely see any sort of resistance to that today. What's your
No,
experience been like with that?
well, two things I was going to say. One is also what Microsoft has done, where you can see it in the screenshot, right, where you have to enter that number. That also stops what we call MFA fatigue, where an attacker will try and just send multiple attempts and eventually get you to just approve, because, right, there's a number. You can't actually, I mean, I guess you could randomly just try and type in numbers, but that's not, the chances of that being what you're going to do to get that dismissed, that isn't going to work. Where,
Yeah.
I think, who was it? Uber? Was it Uber who was the MFA fatigue on? I want to
Yeah,
say.
Uber was one of the companies that got hit that way, where they just 2 o'clock in the morning, put someone's password in and just asked for approval, asked for approval, asked for approval, and the person finally just said enough, approved. Um,
Yeah.
it, you think like, man, that's so wild. How would that happen? It does happen. It absolutely happens, and that's why that's not how products are designed to work anymore if they're following best practice.
Yeah. And then you're totally right about SMS. I mean, the technology. I mean, so if you ask me, all right, I'm not going to have anything for 2FA or I have SMS. Okay, great, use SMS. But like that technology, you can be subject to SMS hijacking, right? Where they will pay small amounts of money to get into mobile carriers and hijack that number so that they intercept it or clone the SMS signals to it. So it definitely moving to one of these app based is the secure and honestly the modern way to move forward with this.
Yeah, there's a great podcast called Darknet Diaries, and they did an episode on this a couple years ago about this SIM card hijacking. There are crime networks that are dedicated to this, and depending on who your carrier is, it can be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for somebody to steal your phone number. And they have a gang of people that do 100 of them at a time. It's a great story if you just want to kind of dive into that for a moment and just listen to how that world works. But the point is, if somebody thinks that they can get a $100,000 payment out of you, of course they're going to be okay with paying $5,000. So you think like, man, that's a large amount of money. Why would anyone ever target me? If you're a leader in your organization or you're in a job role that has access to move funds around, you're a big target because as a relatively high ROI for that threat actor.
Yeah, and because what they're doing is they're going on LinkedIn, they're using, and looking at who they would want to target. They are using open source intelligence, figuring out who's who in a corporation, looking at websites, etc.
Data
So
is
yeah,
king.
Yeah,
yes,
agreed.
indeed.
On both
Marissa, what are you seeing
sides.
on that?
Uh, I understand and I hear the noise around the MFA fatigue, right? How many times do I go into one of our like large clients and I get a tap on the shoulder when they see me and they've got their phone and they're like, you know, like, do we have to do it as much? Like, can we just do it one time? And it's just, I hear the griping on it, and it's my response to them is like, do you want it to be daily? Like, because the way that we have it turned on, this is what we need to do because I've seen it. I've seen the way we had MFA turned on, but they got how did that happen, right? So like it's a cat and mouse game, right? And if we aren't playing the same game, then we're going to lose. And it's obviously you have to come to a solution, especially with your executive team, right? If you're going to come to your executive team and be like, we've got to do this and it's going to be annoying and it's going to cause some more additional clicks and we have to, and this was something that I was just talking about at the last conference that I was at, thanks to also just the education and community that I surround myself in, it's just like, we must always assume we will eventually have a breach. We must assume it. We must, and we have to use the tools that are available for us, especially within the 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 products that we have and the partnerships that we have, including with like Microsoft 365. If they say this is what we need to do because this is the evolution of where we're at, we've got to do it. Because I guarantee you, if we don't do it and we're assuming breach, which we all should be, then we're going to spend a lot more time later down the road remediating something
Yeah.
really bad or
Yeah.
Well,
potentially coming to a point of like your key stakeholders like I'm done, I'm retiring, whatever, I don't want to have anything to do with this closing. I've seen it,
Yeah.
I've seen
Businesses
organizations
are
shut
closing
their
down.
doors. Yeah.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll move us along to the next point in the conversation, which is Microsoft's security score.
So
So
exactly, it's a perfect segue, right, of like, okay,
yeah,
well, let's talk about your security score.
so Microsoft has started publishing best practices for how to configure your Office 365. And the way that they communicate that with organizations is through the security score. So it shows all of the different areas, your identity, your authentication, and then it talks about the settings that they recommend you have in place. Now, some of these settings that they recommend are features of more advanced licensing that you might not have. So, getting a perfect score is not always attainable. But what it does allow you to do is to track your progress over time. So you can see, oh, in this particular client, the security score is 55%. Okay, well that sounds reasonable. If they haven't done a lot to turn their environment, up to best practices, I think what's important to know is that if you did nothing and you were at a 55% and you logged in a year from now, that score would go down because Microsoft's best practices have changed and they continue to evolve. So you have to log in and take a look at this every so often and recognize, oh, I could turn this new feature on. What impact is that going to have on my company? What is that going to help us protect ourselves from? All right, let's do a quick analysis. Let's turn that on. For us, it starts with things like blocking access outside of the United States as just a default setting that we put in place for all of our clients. If you need to travel on vacation or on a work trip, let us know. That's fine. If you get there and you realize you didn't tell us, great. We'll put in an exception for you and you'll be back online in 10 minutes. But the default is that's going to stop threat actors from beating on your door. Um, so we recommend you look at these security scores. There's a lot of things that are free for everyone. The Authenticator app that we just talked about is free for everyone because Microsoft doesn't want to be in the news because some large company got breached and they're associated with Microsoft's product. So
What do I like to say with threat actors coming through the door? They're like little cats on your patio. If you leave some food out, they keep coming back, and then they bring all of their friends. So,
that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Yeah, you do see a lot of repeat activity where if you're if you or suffer some sort of encryption event or you suffer some sort of business email compromise, um, the threat actors like to post about that on the dark web and give each other kudos in the same
your
way that we do
your
internally.
your data becomes more valuable.
Yeah,
Like,
and
Yeah.
now someone else wants to get in too, and all the records about how they did it are on the dark web. Ethan, what do you guys see?
No, totally. We see that over and over because it is this. It is an ecosystem where people specialize as well, right? So they get that initial access broker is able to find out that oh, I sold this credit this to Marissa. Marissa did X. This is good. This is a right
I would
target.
never.
and and the other thing about this, which I love about the security score, is it's about removing those low hanging fruits, right? So, like, okay, we're going to put in a geofence, and that makes it that much harder for that threat actor to get in because
What's
they're
a
looking
geofence?
where you say, all right, we're not going to allow anybody out of the United States to log into Microsoft or something to that effect, where you can block regions or things to that effect, where
Yeah.
you put in these policies that are included that you can harden that environment. And the threat actors, they want the easy money. Like, no, they are like everybody else. They don't necessarily want to work hard, right? So, like, oh, I'll move on to a softer target if I can.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what we see. But we totally see the repeats where we have partners where an event happens, and that's one of the advices we give. We need to watch that even more carefully because uh, you will come back. You become this target, unfortunately.
Okay, and
Yeah.
this is
So
well, this is what I was gonna say about policies. So this is where like my geek fandom of Microsoft 365 is, on similar settings of me with my fangirl with Huntress, but like being able to enforce policies through tools that does it for you is the most powerful thing that you can do for your organization. And if there's a cost that's associated with it that's hard to communicate with your leadership team of why it's important, it is an it makes your policy ironclad, right? The tools do what you tell them to do. People are the wild cards in all of this. We are we are the disaster of all of this. This is why it all exists. So like those policies that Ethan is referring to that you can implement with things like geofencing and all this. So like that is such a powerful tool that to lean into it more and have more conversations around it and write it, manage the expectations with your
Yeah.
team, communicate it with them, and then enforce it with your tools. Like, it's so powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Sorry, I
I know
got passionate for a second.
we're talking about the value of this, but we haven't really gone into how to do it. When you log into Office 365, if you're logging in with an administrative account, in that top left-hand corner, you've got the 9 dots that you click on to navigate between SharePoint and Teams and Word and Outlook. There's a setting there called Admin, and if you click on that, the next menu that comes up, if you click on Security, it'll take you to where you can see your security score. So it also shows you what your score is over time. So on the left side of this info here, you can see where the score has kind of gone up a little bit, and then it's gone back down over time as settings have changed. So it's a really great way to tell the story of security to your leadership teams. This is what we're doing to protect our environment.
And honestly, Andrew, like it is a journey. Like security is not a destination; it is a journey. And so that's what I love about this score as well, because you can see it change over time. You understand how you're doing it, and you get to map to what Marissa was saying about policies and getting people on board. You start to map, you plan to where's the next point we're going to get to. So you're like, all right, we want to move from a 55 to a 60. Let's put together a plan how we're going to do it. And then that journey, you get to reevaluate it. Okay, yeah, that journey's working out. Oh, hold on, you know what? It's causing too much problems. We need to change. But it gets that conversation going, which is so awesome.
Like, give us like a it's like what we're talking about, the secure score, right? 55%. I mean, it's any type of goal or anything that you have, even like when I talk about like our operational side and we have numerical evaluations on it. And what's important is like how do we translate this for the operations of the organization as a whole, right? And like looking at it as like Ethan was saying, it's just like the little just like we're just moving the dial a little bit more at a time. I always say like, oh, 100% secure. That sounds fun. That means we don't have people working here anymore, and it's all operated by robots, and even that might be a little weird. Or we like are, in the government sector, and everything is just completely shut down for everything. So like, we want to be at the let's aim for that
It's a
75,
it's a
80
it's
prime.
a
Let's get
it's a
over
line
80.
between security and usability. And
Yeah,
the goal
yeah,
is to be somewhere in the middle, right? You don't want to be the most usable with no security. You don't want to be the most secure with no usability. You've got to be somewhere in the middle. And we're seeing that Microsoft is making it easier to get closer to security without really changing the usability.
exactly. How many
So
key stakeholders will be upset?
yeah, exactly. So that's what Microsoft is doing. Proda is helping with those things and kind of facilitating those conversations and helping people understand Microsoft's best practices. But then in addition to that, we're doing a
Wait,
couple other things.
I have a client question.
Yes.
I'm putting on my client hat cat. Andrew, if I wanted to know my score and know next steps and stuff, like are you maybe you're about to answer that question. What do I do next? Who do I talk to? How do I know my score?
Well, so that's where you'd go into your admin center in Office 365, and you click on security in your admin center. Then you can see your security score and all the settings that we just talked about. If you're a Proto client or a prospect, I'd recommend you just reach out to your technical account manager, set up a call. We can go through that together, get you some reporting, and make some recommendations based on what we see.
Thanks.
Of course. Yeah, so 365 hardening. What we're doing just in terms of what Proda is doing to respond. We talked about this is in the bottom left, the transition to the Authenticator app, as well as aligning the 365 configuration to best practices. That's that security score. The other things that we're really doing, if we go to the top left, we're hardening your DNS. So this is basically like the phone book of the internet. So how does Microsoft know to reach your email address? You know, they take your, in our case, prototechnology.com, and they translate that into an IP address. So that's basically DNS and how that works. And we can configure DNS with specific records. Think about like a door, and you put different types of locks on that door. These are things that help keep people out that are not supposed to be there. Protections against spoofing, where someone tries to send an email to your domain, or tries to send an email that claims to be from your domain. All of those things that people try to do those business email compromises. So our technical team has put together best practices for setting up the DNS records for, as a couple different terms here, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. These things all work together to reduce the likelihood that someone can impersonate your business's domain, or that they can deliver spam to your domain by just rejecting emails outright if they're from a known malicious place, or if they're not on a whitelist. Um, Ethan, what are you guys
Yeah.
seeing in terms of DNS security, or what are your thoughts on best practices there?
No, so it's getting those SPF, because I think the other thing people forget or don't realize is that when the internet was thought of as a technology, and email in particular, like it was based on the assumption of trusting. So like to forge, an email is actually incredibly easy to like forge who it's coming from and make do these things. So that's why these are some of those low hanging fruits of securing it, of your SPF records. The other things that I'm not sure if you're looking at is potentially, buying domain names that are similar, or monitoring
Great point.
potentially for typo squatting domains, is some things
Those
I've
are
seen people
so
do.
effective. I've seen like those are the ones where because it's easy to see if it's a gmail.com, right? Clearly it's not them, but they're so creative with the typo stuff and you just
Yeah.
Yeah, common misspellings. That's why Google owns 400 different domains, and they're all the different ways you could misspell Google, and Google with the wrong number of O's. All of these things are determined to reduce the likelihood that someone can pretend to be Google.
because that's how
Yep.
we read. Have you guys ever seen those funny ones where it's like they jumble all the words, but the first letter and last letter is all the same, and you're able to
Yeah,
really just read quickly through it because that's how we read. So yeah, it's an easy
Yes.
one.
Yeah,
um,
and so those are what we're definitely seeing of effective ways to mitigate risk, because this is all about risk mitigation at the end of the day, right? It is. So yeah, these are great ways to, and it doesn't cost anything from
yeah.
to create an SPF record or a DKIM. Like, it takes some effort, but as an actual cost, and then it's just maintenance. Once again, once you have it set up properly. So
And this is why it's so important that we have ongoing conversations with our clients, because these types of best practices change over time. If you implemented Office 365 5 years ago and you haven't touched it since, there's a good chance that serious vulnerabilities exist in your configuration that need to be addressed because they're no longer best practice. So
yeah.
ongoing conversations with your IT provider, your security provider are crucial, because they help you adapt to the threats that are new and improved for this year, to reduce the likelihood that you're going to be the person that they're able to get into.
As a matter of fact, that's one of the first key steps on onboarding new clients nowadays is starting with email because we
Yeah.
know that this is the most crucial wide open vulnerability from everything that we're talking through. That's the first thing is get in there and see what's going on because it can be a little scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Email impersonation protection. So this is beyond what we would traditionally consider a spam filter. So we're used to getting maybe an email that has a summary of the things that our spam filter caught, and you can release those things if they're known good. That's good at keeping out junk, but it's not necessarily good at keeping out malicious content, and it's certainly not good at detecting whenever someone is pretending to be someone that they're not. So we've got advanced tools that we put in place. These are a part of our 2023 service plan. So all of our new clients get these built in as a part of their agreement, where we have artificial intelligence that's scanning who the people are in your company, what they talk about typically, and they look for things that are abnormal. So if somebody's never dealt with direct deposit information before, and then all of a sudden they send a request asking for something to get changed, it's possible that that's a malicious request, and so they put it in a special folder and they send you a notification that it's occurred. You can release it if it's a legitimate thing, but I'd say that the false positive rate is really slow there. There's not a lot of false positives.
And that's so key, right? Because there you people do have their normal way of responding and interacting via email. So this is one of those things where AI can really help us in becoming more secure by learning those patterns and recognizing those things and putting a flag, as you said, right? Just like,
Yeah.
hey, this is out of the ordinary. Let's pay attention to this because it's about. Marissa said we're all so busy. We're trying to kill that one email, move on to the next thing. That to have a little just a little road bump, just something to slow it down, just a little bit.
Yeah. And the last thing that we're doing is the last thing that we've added into our stack new for this year is the security monitoring for Office 365 in general. So we've been working with Huntress, and they've developed a new service that we're including in all of our new plans now, that offers the same level of protection that we offer for computers and laptops and servers, and bringing in Huntress's capabilities to start monitoring, what's going on inside of your Office 365 environment.
Yeah,
Ethan, can you speak
and
to kind of what that
yeah,
looks like and why it's important?
yeah. So I think there's two things that what we're doing. Why it's important is because as everybody is aware, we are moving more and more to communication through it, email that is, and with SharePoint and sharing files. Like we are quite aware that this cloud infrastructure, and we can all have roll our eyes on saying cloud, but like Microsoft 365 is this environment. And we can take all of these preventative steps, but if you assume compromise mentality, then that means you need to actually be monitoring detection because we say there is no solution that's 100% effective. And so it's having these layers. And what we get with monitor and detecting is we start to write these rules where we start seeing, bad actors. We start saying, oh, hold on, we know these list of IP addresses are malicious and people logging in from these are doing bad things. Or we realize that Microsoft records what device the communication is from, and our team realized they could write a detector looking for things coming in via Python command line, and realize that yes, normal people, Andrew, are not authenticating via command line,
Just
calling.
Jeremy.
And so we can see that, and then our team, because we are a 24/7 SOC, with a follow the sun model, if it's in the middle of the night, our Australia team can do what we call an account isolation maneuver, where we will sign that account out of all devices, um, lock and disable that account, revoke a session cookie, so that therefore in the morning, Florida, you guys can take care of that, and we don't have to worry about, oh, was somebody in there, what they were doing. They're evicted immediately.
All
um
about minimizing the impact.
yes, exactly, and I think that's the key thing, right? Minimize that impact. Yes, maybe they got in there, maybe they created a rule to start to try and do something malicious, but let's minimize that impact so that you're not actually losing money at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I know that this is a relatively new service to the Hunters team. Is there anything interesting that you guys have seen that
Oh,
so
well,
far that would be fun to share?
yeah, well, one of the interesting ones we didn't realize. I'd actually heard about it, kind of talked maybe a year ago on a podcast for Risky Biz that they had mentioned it as kind of in theory, but we actually saw a threat actor who got in to a mailbox. We advised the partner, and then like within 6 hours, it was shortly thereafter, we like saw the rule recreate. We're like, did you not follow our recommendations? What's going on? The partner's like, no, we did. And we looked at the data and we realized we could see that the threat actor had installed a application. So if you're in Outlook Web Access, you will sometimes get like an application and say, hey, can I have rights into your Outlook, some add-in or what have you. And they had installed basically an email client web app to authorize it, that even though they got locked out and kicked out,
Wild.
they were back in. So they had figured out persistence, a word we use on the endpoint to describe it. And we were like, wow. So we've started to write detectors and figure out how to detect that sooner to alert our partners. So that's probably one of the craziest things that I thought we found
That's
recently.
That's
great.
crazy.
Yeah. Um, so they were able to get whatever this, some weird email client never heard of that, I'm sure it had a legitimate use at one point in time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to see it when it's happening in real time, but whew,
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is email is that major vulnerability. I was at a show in Southwest Louisiana and talking to a guy who provides IT services, and he had a 20-person trailer company where they had sent off, they basically weld trailers. That's their business, and somebody convinced them in an business email compromise to wire $500,000 out.
Wow.
$500,000 to a small 20-person company. I mean, they figured it was going to take them, I think he said like 20 years of making trailers to get the profit back from that. I
Wow.
mean, so it's devastating, these types of things. And there's the point about minimize that impact.
yep.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And if you'd like more information about that service, if you're a current customer and you don't already have that in your package, let us know. We can talk through what that looks like. And did want to take a moment. I know that we're at the top of the hour, and a lot of you were generous enough to join us for lunch. If anybody needs to drop off, no worries. We're going to continue. We've got another slide or two to cover, and then we'll distribute the recording of this talk afterwards to anyone who needed to leave or any of your coworkers that might not have been able to join. You think would find value in this conversation. So
Yeah.
the last kind of group of things we wanted to talk about today are, we talked about what Microsoft can do. We talked about what Proda is recommending, the things that we've started to put in place for our clients. Um, let's talk about the other things that you could potentially do to make an impact on protecting your Office 365. We talked about this a little bit, the cybersecurity awareness training, making sure that every employee is getting the latest training, at least annually, and then ultimately getting updated training at the every annual mark on the latest and greatest security events that we're seeing, and the newest ways to protect ourselves. And all new employees as well, because that employee that just joined you last month, if you're used to just doing your security awareness training once a year, it may be 6 9 months before that person gets into your normal training cycle. So work with a product that can enroll people as soon as they join your organization, so that they understand how you expect them to use technology.
And setting that expectation is so key, Andrew. Like that right, that starts to define your culture, your business culture, that you take these things seriously. I think that's the other part, that security awareness training. Yes, it's good to make people take it, but it also starts to build that muscle that we care about these things and we take this seriously. Um,
Yeah.
which is why you have the simulations, right? Because that then that then helps you identify who are the people. Maybe they're passing their training, but they're not getting it for some reason, right? Now you have some people you can go and talk to and have conversations about, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. And we have a lot of clients that that do the phishing simulations. They do the automated training, but in addition to that, annually they invite us into their boardroom, and we sit down with their employees and we run through scenarios together, the tabletop exercises. We also kind of go through our more advanced security awareness training that's interactive and tailored to their industry, so that they can really drive those points home and tie them into the other business initiatives that are going on, so that the clients, their end users, get the full picture and understand all the context behind why security is important.
Yeah, and that's so key, especially those tabletop exercises to start to say, okay, what if, how would we deal with these types of things? Because you need to think through some of them. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Those
Yeah,
are
and,
my
and
favorite.
I've been in some really interesting sessions with Ethan at conferences where he's working with service providers like Proda to take all of the different types of threats that Huntress sees, and develop different games that we can play to uh, practice our response and make sure that our policies are tested and understood by all, so that when someone picks up the phone and you say, hey, I've got something weird going on in my email, you get somebody who is qualified to help you troubleshoot that and investigate that quickly, because those are things that are time sensitive.
no, definitely. And that gets to policies and procedures, right? Where, and I mean, that's these next couple bullet
Yeah.
points. And I mean, I came out of ops, so I was totally an ops person, and I love so. Marissa, I will fanboy with you on policies and procedures day in, day out, is what I will say. Because like these are great ways of like these don't cost any money. Like establishing a wire transfer policy or
Just do
technology
it.
use, just do it. Um, and it doesn't even have to be perfect. Like I mean, that's right. You just get something there, minimal viable,
Yeah.
and um, you know, those are what
It's
is
a
Sometimes
key.
like the tabletops help with that too because you're able to talk about it in a room with all your key stakeholders and you're like, I didn't think about that. What? Okay, just do it. Just create it. You can make edits to it later. Just do it. Make sure everyone has it. It's easy.
Yeah, and this is one of those things, you can do some quick Googling and you can find templates,
So many
or
templates.
talk to your technical account manager at Proda, and we can find a template and help you modify it, to make something that makes sense for your business, and help you with the adoption that's sometimes necessary. Maybe you want to put a new policy in place, and it requires you to make some settings changes or implement a new tool. We're experienced in kind of guiding processes, all the way to completion with our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
it
yeah,
oh, go
well,
ahead.
one thing I was just going to say is like also these become really helpful for cyber insurance. If
Yep.
you have cyber insurance, like these help lower your cyber insurance premiums at times, having these
Right.
defined policies, and will help you understand your policies that you have from a cyber insurance potentially of what you are protected from and things like that. So that's
Right.
another way these there's definitely a return on investment for a business.
And we need cybersecurity insurance because we assume breach.
Yeah. Yeah. Cyber insurance. We did our last webinar with Fifth Wall. They're a cyber insurance broker and a partner of Proda. We talked through cyber risk. We talked about how to lower your premiums. So please, if you're a Proda client or prospect, grab that recording, or reach out to us for a copy of it, and listen to that talk, because that had a lot of really insightful information about lowering premiums and making sure that you're eligible in the first place.
Yeah.
The last point here is just around, what happens after you've experienced fraud. I know, Ethan, you and I talked about the IC3. Can you kind of share a little bit of insight
Yeah,
around how
so
they can be helpful?
yeah, IC3 is the FBI's reporting arm. So it's a website, ic3.gov. Those get any cyber crime can get there. And what most people don't realize is that the FBI works with the Secret Service and has a recovery asset team, so RAT, Um, which to me triggers a whole.
Oh, did we lose
Yeah,
him?
I think he
Oh,
his Wi-Fi might have paused for a moment.
is that,
You're
Oh,
back.
there you are.
am I back? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Head Wi-Fi in the Wi-Fi at hotels. But what I was saying was IC3 is part of the FBI's reporting, and they will have a recovery asset team who has a 70% recovery rate of recovering or freezing funds. If you get those reported to them within like the first 5 days of a business email compromise, they have a high rate of trying to stop ACH or wire transfers. So very important to report those. It happens. I mean, $2.7 billion gets reported, so it's not like you should be ashamed or embarrassed.
That's
Uh,
a great point.
yeah, like the FBI wants that reporting so they and I was at a conference last week where the FBI was talking, and it was out in Louisiana, and because of a report that somebody out in that parish had done, it actually tied into a large cyber organization that the FBI
Wow,
was able to go and take down because of a business reporting it, and they followed the money. So something very
That's
important to do.
cool. That's
Yeah.
super cool. It's cool to see the community around this as well. It's like a very just very hands-on and very willing to share. And I think that's like that is such a key driving point to end this is like it's okay because it happens and
yeah,
like to not be embarrassed that it happens is so important because it happens. It happens a lot. It's a big industry and it's okay because all of us again we're assuming that it's going to happen to all
yeah.
of us. So
Yes.
minimize impact.
Not if, but when.
Yep.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So lastly, and first of all, thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Marissa, for joining in the conversation today. I really enjoyed talking through cyber risk and Office 365 best practices. I want to encourage everyone who's attending live, and then anyone who watches the recording of the webinar afterwards. Please give us your feedback. What are things that you'd like to see on our next series? What are things that we could do better, or ways that we could create more value for you and the education that we want to bring? Scan the QR code or type in the address here and drop us a line. Tell us what you thought or what you'd like to see next time.
It was very nice chatting with you, Ethan, and of
It
course
was.
Andrew as always and it's good to fangirl and fanboy with you.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thank you for having me. Bye bye.
and thanks to
Bye.
everyone who attended.